The fluorescent lights of the sparse supermarket on the Landstrasse hummed a weary, monotonous tune, a soundtrack to Lena Huber's mounting panic. The Saturday evening rain in Linz beat a relentless tattoo against the large glass windows, mirroring the frantic rhythm of her heart. In her shopping basket were the barest of essentials: a liter of milk, a loaf of bread, some butter, and a small carton of eggs. Beside her, 5-year-old Sophie, her small face framed by a bright yellow raincoat, stared with wide, hopeful eyes at the display of Milka chocolate bars by the checkout counter. "Mama, please," she whispered, her voice a tiny thread of hope. "Just one, the one with the strawberries." Lena's hand trembled as she opened her worn wallet. Inside lay a few crumpled euro notes and a handful of coins. She had counted it 3 times already, but the number remained stubbornly the same. After paying for the groceries, she would have exactly €2.40 left to last until her cleaning job paid her next week. It wasn't enough. The shame was a physical thing, a hot, suffocating blanket. She knelt, bringing herself to eye level with her daughter, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "I'm sorry, Schatz," she murmured, her voice catching. She leaned in closer, so the stern-faced woman behind them in line wouldn't hear the full extent of their failure. "We can't. We're broke." Sophie's face crumpled, her lower lip trembling. The tears came silently, as they always did, as if she already understood that loud sobs were a luxury they couldn't afford. Lena's own eyes burned as she hugged her daughter, burying her face in Sophie's damp hair to hide her shame. She didn't see the man behind them in line, the man who had been impatiently checking his watch just a moment before, suddenly go still. Maximilian Steiner had been having a terrible day. A multi-million euro deal in Linz had hit a snag, forcing him to stay the weekend instead of returning to his sterile, quiet penthouse in Vienna. He had been annoyed by the slow-moving line, by the crying child, by the sheer inconvenience of being in a common supermarket when he could have sent an assistant. He was a man who moved markets and commanded boardrooms. He did not wait in line for groceries. But then he had heard the mother's whispered words, spoken in German but universal in their heartbreaking finality. Asterisk, we're sind plight. We're broke. Asterisk, he looked at the woman properly for the first time. She was young, her face pale with exhaustion, but there was a fierce, protective pride in the way she held her daughter. He saw her worn coat, her sensible, scuffed shoes, and the raw dignity in her posture. A ghost of a memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. Another woman, his wife, years ago, her eyes filled with a different kind of desperation he had been too arrogant and too busy to understand. A pain he had buried for a decade lanced through him. He saw the cashier ring up the meager groceries, saw the woman's trembling hand count out the last of her coins. And in that moment, Maximilian Steiner did something he had never done before. He acted not with his head, but with his heart. As Lena gathered her small bag, trying to pull a brave face for Sophie, a hand extended past her. A man's hand, placing a thick, tight bundle of 100 euro notes directly on the conveyor belt. It landed with a soft, impossible thud. Lena stared at the money, then up at the man. He was tall, with silver-streaked hair and eyes the color of a winter storm. His face was severe, almost cold, but there was something in his gaze that was not pity, but a strange, urgent intensity. The cashier gasped, her eyes wide. The other people in line fell silent, staring. The world seemed to shrink to the space between Lena and this imposing stranger. "I can't accept that," she stammered, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "Please take it," he said, his voice a low, firm command. "For your daughter. For the chocolate." He placed his own items on the counter, a bottle of expensive mineral water and a single, perfect apple, paid with a black credit card, and turned to leave. He didn't wait for a thank you. He didn't wait for another protest. He simply walked out of the supermarket and disappeared into a waiting black Mercedes that pulled silently away from the curb, leaving Lena standing under the harsh fluorescent lights with a fortune on the counter and her world completely upended. Lena felt the stares of everyone in the checkout line, a mixture of envy, suspicion, and pity. Her first instinct was to run, to leave the money where it lay, to preserve the tattered remnants of her pride. But then she looked at Sophie, whose tear-streaked face was now a mask of pure, childish wonder as she stared at the pile of cash. This wasn't about her pride. This was about her daughter. This was about a warm apartment, a full pantry, and the simple dignity of being able to afford a chocolate bar. With shaking hands, she gathered the money, her heart hammering against her ribs. The cashier, snapping out of her stupor, handed her the receipt. "That's 10,000 euros, the cashier whispered in disbelief. Lena could only nod, her throat too tight to speak. She took Sophie's hand and walked out of the store, the automatic doors sliding open to reveal the rainy Linz evening. The black Mercedes was gone. The man was gone. But the impossible, life-altering reality of the money in her purse remained. Back in their small, cold apartment in Erfurt, the weight of the day finally crashed down on Lena. She sank onto the worn sofa, the bundle of cash sitting on the coffee table like a strange, alien artifact. Sophie, oblivious to the emotional turmoil her mother was experiencing, was happily eating the Milka bar Lena had gone back into the store to buy. The simple act of being able to give her daughter that small treat had felt both wonderful and deeply shameful. Lena spread the crisp banknotes on the table. 10,000 euros. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. It was rent for a year. It was new winter coats, proper shoes for Sophie, a repair for the heating that had been broken since last winter. It was a safety net, a buffer against the constant, grinding anxiety of poverty. But it also felt like a brand, a mark of her failure. A man had looked at her and seen a charity case so pathetic that he felt compelled to drop a fortune on her. Humiliation warred with overwhelming relief. As she was bundling the money back together, a small, elegant business card fell out from the center. It was printed on heavy, cream-colored stock. In stark, minimalist letters, it read, Maximilian Steiner, CEO, Steiner Industries. The name hit her with the force of a physical blow. She knew that name. Everyone in Austria knew that name. Maximilian Steiner was a titan of industry, a reclusive billionaire whose empire spanned from steel manufacturing to advanced technology. He was a phantom, rarely photographed, intensely private, a man who moved in circles so far removed from her own they might as well have been on different planets. And he had been standing behind her in the Spar, buying an apple. This new information only deepened the mystery. Why would a man like that, a man who could buy and sell companies with a flick of his pen, intervene so dramatically in the life of a struggling single mother? It made no sense. It was too much, too strange. She couldn't keep the money. She couldn't live with the weight of such an inexplicable act of charity. She had to return it. Or at the very least, she had to understand. She found the website for Steiner Industries, a sleek, corporate monolith online. The headquarters were in Vienna, but there was a major regional office right here in Linz, in one of the modern glass towers on the Danube. Her resolve hardened. She would go there on Monday. She would find him, and she would get answers. Across the city, in the penthouse suite of the Hotel Schiller Park, Maximilian Steiner stood at a window overlooking the rain-slicked Hauptplatz. He should have been reviewing the quarterly reports for his Linz subsidiary, but his mind was still back in the supermarket. He saw the young mother's face, the exhaustion and the fierce love in her eyes. He heard her whisper, "We're broke." And he saw the ghost of his past. He saw his wife, Clara. She had been so full of life, an artist who painted with bold, vibrant colors. But after she had lost their first baby, the colors had faded. A deep, consuming depression had taken hold, a darkness he had been too young, too arrogant, and too immersed in building his empire to understand. He remembered a day, just before she left him, when she had broken down in a department store, crying because she couldn't decide on a shade of paint for a nursery they would never use. He hadn't comforted her. He had been embarrassed. He had pulled her from the store, his grip on her arm too tight, his words sharp with impatience. He had seen her illness as a weakness, a flaw in the perfect life he was trying to construct. She had left a week later, and he had never forgiven himself. He had never seen her again. Giving that money to the young mother, to Lena, it hadn't been a calculated act. It had been an impulse, a desperate, irrational attempt to right an old wrong, to offer the compassion to a stranger that he had failed to give to the woman he loved. He had thought the act would bring him some sort of peace. Instead, it had just reopened the wound, leaving him feeling more empty and alone than ever. He had her name now, having had his security chief run the credit card transaction from the store. Lena Huber, a single mother, recently laid off from a job cleaning at the local university. He knew he should leave it at that. He had helped. His part was done, but he couldn't shake the image of her face. He couldn't shake the feeling that this strange, random intersection of their lives was not yet over. Lena spent the entire weekend wrestling with her decision. The 10,000 euros sat in a shoebox under her bed, a constant, humming presence in her small apartment. On Monday morning, her resolve firm, she dressed in her only professional outfit, a simple black skirt and a white blouse, and took the tram downtown. The headquarters of Steiner Industries was an imposing tower of glass and steel, a fortress of wealth and power. She felt small and insignificant as she walked into the marble lobby. The receptionist, a cool, polished woman, looked at her with barely concealed disdain when she asked to see Mr. Steiner. "Do you have an appointment?" the woman asked, her tone implying that the question was absurd. "No," Lena admitted, "but it's a personal matter. It's very important." The receptionist's smile was thin. "Mr. Steiner does not take unscheduled meetings. If you'd like to leave a message, I can see that his assistant gets it." Lena knew this was her only chance. She took a deep breath and placed the shoebox on the marble counter. "Please," she said, her voice steady despite her pounding heart, "just give this to him, and tell him that Lena Huber would like to thank him in person." The receptionist looked at the battered shoebox as if it contained a venomous snake, but something in Lena's determined expression must have convinced her. She made a call, her voice a low, skeptical murmur. A few minutes later, a man in an impeccably tailored suit appeared. He introduced himself as Mr. Steiner's personal assistant. "Mr. Steiner will see you," he said, his own expression a mask of professional curiosity. He led her to a private elevator, which ascended with a silent, stomach-lurching speed to the top floor. The office was breathtaking, a vast, minimalist space with panoramic views of the city and the distant Alps. Maximilian Steiner was standing by the window, just as she had imagined him, a commanding figure in his own domain. He turned as she entered, his gray eyes assessing her. "Ms. Huber," he said, his voice as cool and controlled as his surroundings. "I was told you had something for me." Lena walked forward and placed the shoebox on his enormous glass desk. "I can't keep this," she said simply, "but I wanted to thank you. What you did, it was kind, but it's too much." He didn't even glance at the box. "It was not a loan," he said. "I expect nothing in return." "I know," she said. "That's why I can't take it. I don't want to be a project, a charity case." A flicker of something, surprise, respect, crossed his face. "That was not my intention." "Then what was?" she asked, her courage fueled by the sheer absurdity of the situation. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the city below. "It was an impulse," he finally said, "a response to a memory. It had very little to do with you, and for that, I apologize." The public nature of my gesture was inappropriate. The apology shocked her. Men like him didn't apologize, especially not to women like her. "Your life," he continued, turning back to her. "Your financial situation, it is none of my business. However, your determination is. You were not on the list of people I was scheduled to see today, and yet, here you are. My assistant tells me you were very persuasive." He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Sit, Miss Huber. Since you've gone to the trouble of coming all this way, perhaps we can find a solution that satisfies your pride and my impulse." As she sat, she noticed a resume on his desk. It was her resume. He had already been looking into her. Her heart began to beat faster. "I understand you have a background in art history," he said, picking up the paper. "Specifically, in fresco restoration." "I do," she said, surprised. "It's what I studied at the university before you had your daughter," he finished for her. Yes. It was a passion she had been forced to abandon for a series of low-paying, soul-crushing jobs to make ends meet. "My family foundation," he said, his tone shifting to business, "is the primary sponsor for the restoration of the frescoes at St. Martin's Church. The project lead recently went on an unexpected medical leave. The position is open." Lena stared at him, her mind struggling to keep up. St. Martin's was the oldest church in Austria. The restoration was a hugely prestigious project. "The job requires someone with both a scholarly knowledge of the period and practical, hands-on experience," he continued. "Your university thesis, Pigments and Plasters of the Carolingian Era, was, I'm told, quite brilliant." He had read her thesis. The thought was both terrifying and flattering. "I'm offering you the position, Miss Huber," he said. "Interim lead, with the possibility of becoming permanent. The salary would be more than sufficient to provide for you and your daughter. There is on-site childcare provided for all Foundation employees. This was a dream. A wild, impossible dream. Why? She whispered. You don't even know if I'm any good. I am an excellent judge of character and talent, he said with a confidence that was absolute. And I am willing to take the risk. This is not charity, Miss Huber. It is an opportunity. A job you are uniquely qualified for. The money in that box, he gestured to the shoebox, is a temporary fix. This is a future. If you want it. Lena looked at the powerful man sitting across from her, a man who had seen her at her absolute lowest and was now offering her a chance to reclaim the life she thought she had lost forever. She thought of Sophie and of the pride she would feel in showing her daughter that her mother was more than just a cleaner, that she was a creator, a restorer of beauty. The decision was not a decision at all. It was an awakening. When do I start? She asked, her voice clear and strong. A rare, genuine smile touched Maximilian Steiner's lips. Immediately, he said. Working at St. Martin's Church was like stepping into another century. The air was cool and smelled of ancient stone, incense, and damp plaster. For Lena, it was like coming home. The years of cleaning toilets and mopping floors seemed to melt away as she rediscovered her passion. The work was painstaking and required immense concentration, but it was a language she understood. She was good at it, better than she had remembered. The team of restorers, initially skeptical of her sudden appointment, were quickly won over by her knowledge and her collaborative spirit. Maximilian was true to his word. The on-site childcare was excellent, a bright, cheerful space where Sophie thrived. For the first time in years, Lena could work without the constant, nagging worry about her daughter. She could focus, she could excel. And she did. Maximilian began to visit the church, using the excuse of overseeing his foundation's investment. He would stand for long periods, watching her work, his expression unreadable. At first, his presence made her nervous, but gradually, his quiet observations became a source of comfort. He rarely spoke of the restoration itself, but he would ask about Sophie, about her day, about the challenges of balancing work and motherhood. He was a surprisingly good listener. One afternoon, he found her in the churchyard, eating a simple lunch on a stone bench while Sophie chased pigeons. He sat beside her, not too close, but not too far. She seems happy, he said, nodding towards Sophie. She is, Lena replied, a genuine smile lighting up her face. For the first time, I feel like I can give her the life she deserves. And it's because of you. I still don't fully understand why you did all this, but I am so grateful. Maximilian was quiet for a long moment, watching a cloud pass overhead. I had a wife once, he said, his voice low, the words unexpected. Her name was Clara. She was everything to me. But I was young, ambitious, and foolish. I didn't know how to love her properly. I didn't know how to see her pain. Lena sat perfectly still, sensing that this was a sacred confession. We lost a child, he continued, his voice rough with an old grief. And I failed her. I ran from her sorrow because it mirrored my own. I buried myself in work and left her to drown. When she finally left me, it was a mercy she gave to me, not a cruelty. I learned too late that a man who cannot share in his wife's pain does not deserve to share in her joy. He turned to her, his gray eyes filled with a profound sadness. When I saw you in that store, I saw her. I saw the pain I had ignored, the strength I had failed to support. My gesture, it was for her. A futile apology sent out into the universe. I never expected you to show up at my office. Lena felt tears welling in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Maximilian, she whispered, using his first name for the first time. He gave a small, sad smile. I am too. But seeing you here, seeing you thrive, seeing the light in your daughter's eyes, it has been a restoration. Of a different kind. Their friendship deepened after that day. The professional boundaries began to blur into a genuine, personal connection. He would join her and Sophie for walks along the Danube on Sunday afternoons. He taught Sophie how to skip stones on the water, his deep laugh echoing in the crisp autumn air. Lena saw the lonely billionaire begin to transform into a man who was learning how to find joy in small, simple moments. She was falling for him, a slow, terrifying, and exhilarating process. And she sensed, in the way he looked at her, that the feeling was mutual. The restoration of the main apse fresco was complete. It was a masterpiece, a section of the church's history brought back to vibrant life, largely due to a technique Lena had rediscovered from an obscure medieval text. The foundation held a small, private reception at the church to celebrate. Lena stood with a glass of champagne, feeling a sense of accomplishment so profound it was almost dizzying. She had done this. She had earned this. Maximilian found her standing before her work, her face illuminated by the soft gallery lighting. "It's breathtaking," he said, his voice filled with genuine awe. "You are a true artist, Lena." "You gave me the chance to be one again," she said softly. He stood beside her, their shoulders almost touching. The air between them was thick with unspoken emotions. "My life was like this fresco before you came into it," he said, his voice a low murmur. "Faded, cracked, forgotten. You have brought the color back, Lena. You and Sophie." He turned to face her, taking her free hand in his. "I know our worlds are impossibly different. I know my past is a shadow that will always be with me. But I am a better man when I am with you. And I have been a lonely man for a very long time." He searched her eyes, his own vulnerable and full of hope. "I am asking you, Lena Huber, if you would be willing to take another restoration project." My heart. The declaration was so unexpected, so earnest, that she could only stare at him, her heart hammering. She thought of the journey that had brought them here, a journey that started with a moment of public humiliation and a stranger's inexplicable act. It was a modern fairy tale, improbable and yet entirely real. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, what her answer was. She smiled, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "I think," she said, her voice steady and sure, "it's a project I would be honored to take on." A year later, on another crisp Saturday evening in October, Lena, Maximilian, and Sophie walked hand in hand through the Linz Hauptplatz. The city was alive with the energy of the weekend, the scent of roasted chestnuts in the air. They were a family, their bond forged not in a boardroom, but in the quiet, patient work of restoring beauty and healing old wounds. They stopped at a small stand, and Maximilian bought 3 cones of ice cream. As he handed one to Sophie, her face lit up with a joyful smile. Lena watched them, her heart overflowing. The memory of that desperate night in the supermarket felt like a story from someone else's life. She looked at Maximilian, who was now laughing as Sophie managed to get chocolate ice cream on his nose. He was no longer the haunted, severe man he had been. He was a man reborn, a man who had found his second chance in the most unexpected of places. He caught her watching him, his eyes filled with a deep, abiding love. He had not just given her 10,000 euros that night. He had given her a new life, and she, in turn, had given him back his own. Sometimes, Lena thought, the greatest acts of kindness are not acts of charity at all. They are investments in hope, in second chances, in the quiet, miraculous restoration of the human heart.